Welcome, time travelers. Come travel through time with me, one historical event at a time. Today, we're starting off by going back 481 years, back to 1542, when Mary, Queen of Scots, was born. And at just 6 days old, she became Queen of Scotland. After her father passed away from the effects of a nervous collapse after the Battle of Solway Moss, or potentially after drinking contaminated water while on a campaign tour. After that slight heartbreak, let's travel 312 years after this event and briefly touch on religion. All I'm simply asking is that you do not start anything about religion in the comment section. Please. Welcome to 1854, when Pope Pius IX proclaimed the doctrine of Immaculate Conception, asserting that Mary, Jesus' mother, was preserved free from the effects of original sin from the first instant of her conception. Now let's travel to Mexico 32 years after this event. Now, welcome back to the Western Hemisphere. The year is 1886, when Mexican painter Diego Rivera, whose bold, large-scale murals stimulated a revival of fresco painting in Latin America, was born. Now we are going to travel back across the pond 17 years after his birth to 1903. In 1903, the English thinker and scholar Herbert Spencer, best known for his work on the synthetic philosopher, passed away in Bringington, Sussex, England. We're still staying over in Europe, but we're traveling 45 years to Paris, France. Now that we have made it to 1948, let's head to the UN General Assembly, where they called on the Security Council to reconsider applications of 12 nations which had been denied membership in the UN, 7 through Soviet veto. Now we are going to head back to the US. I should be more specific, Washington State, 8 years after. In 1956, John Philip Eisenhower Jr., an American timberman, passed away in Tacoma, Washington at the age of 57. I'm sorry that event was sad. However, I might have something that might cheer you up. So let's travel forward 22 years and learn what we can. Welcome to 1978, where the American classic film The Deer Hunter, starring Robert De Niro and Christopher Walken, among others, had its world premiere. An emotionally shattering look at the effects of the Vietnam War on young American men set to fight in it. The movie later won an Oscar for Best Picture. Moving forward just a mere 2 years to 1980, But across the country, we go to an unfortunate event. Now that we have landed in 1980, where John Lennon was fatally shot by a fan. On this day, in 1980, British musician John Lennon, who rose to fame with the Beatles and had a successful solo career, was fatally shot by Mark David Champion in New York City, causing a global outpouring of grief. I know, you probably didn't want another sad event. I truly am sorry. I truly, truly am sorry. Now, let's travel to our next event that happened on the same day, same year, just in Zimbabwe. This one might be a little bit more happy, it could be sad, depending on how you want to take it. Welcome to 1980 Zimbabwe, where Edgar Z. Takir, head of Zimbabwe's Manpower Planning and Development Ministry, was freed by Salisbury Court, even though he had been found guilty of murdering a white farmer in early August. The decision was to set Takir and one of his aides free was based on the 1975 law that protected government officials from criminal charges resulting from anti-terrorist activities. Now let's go to where I'm guessing the White House in Washington, D.C., 8 years later after these two events. Picture this. The President of the United States is Ronald Reagan. The Soviet General Secretary is Mikhail Gorbachev. The year, you may ask? Well, the year is 1879. Or I'm sorry, 1987. U.S. President Ronald Reagan and Soviet General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev signed a nuclear weapons reduction treaty. I know, not what you were expecting. So let's travel 4 years later to 1991. This one I'm not going to oversell. In 1991 is when Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus signed an agreement to form the Commonwealth of Independent States in the wake of the demise of the Soviet Union. I did not realize that same year that I was born, the Soviet Union fell. Or right around. It fell. Now we go to New Zealand 6 years later. Welcome to 1997, Zimbabwe. I'm sorry, New Zealand, where Jenny Shipley is sworn in as Prime Minister, the first woman to occupy that post. Shipley upset Jim Boger in elections in November. Now we are going to skip over a sad time in the U.S. history and jump to an interesting event 7 years into the future. For the sports fans, the year is 2004. The event is that Maya Hammond, a leading figure in the U.S. women's football, also known as the U.S. soccer, retired from the sport. Now we are going back to our government, but 2 years later. In 2006, the U.S. House of Representatives passed a bill favored by President George W. Bush, the younger one, that permitted the sale of civilian nuclear reactors and fuel to India. Now let's go to 2009 to Tangalooma. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. In 2009, Julian Astercide Gonzalez, the head of the anti-drug officials in Honduras, was unfortunately killed by a gunman on a by gunmen's on motorcycles in Trilaka, place we're in currently in the point in history. Now we are going to 2010, 13 years ago. We're still in America, or I should say we're back in America. In 2010, the American aerospace venture SpaceX became the first commercial company to release a spacecraft, the Dragon capsule, into orbit and successfully return it to Earth. Now this takes us 6 years later to 2016. In 2016, an American astronaut and politician, John Glenn, who was the first U.S. astronaut to orbit Earth, for which he was regarded as a national hero, passed away at the age of 95. And just 3 years later, in 2019, an American actor and puppeteer, Caroll Spinney, who created the characteristics and mannerism of Big Bird, a larger-than-life puppet he played for nearly 50 years, passed away at the age of 85. And that brings us back to 2023 and our current history. If you guys liked how I did this video, please let me know in the comment section. I don't know if I'm going to do any more, depending on how well this video does. I'll see you in the next one.